How do I handle this as a mother? False accusations tore our family apart. I have been in a mother's worst nightmare for the last year. A year ago, almost exactly, my daughter accused my current partner of sexual assault. They incurred an investigation and charges laid. Court proceedings are happening just very slowly. However, her father kept me completely in the dark as to what the situation was. My daughter doesn't live with me. She lives full-time with her father, and apparently this happened when she was visiting me for the summer. I have been pursuing court action to be able to talk to my daughter, but it's a slow process. My ex is fighting tooth and nail to keep me from contacting her, with his justification being that I'm still in a relationship with the person that allegedly assaulted her. But basically, through legal proceedings, we were finally able to get her side of the story, and it is absolutely untrue. I can't go into details, but the set of circumstances laid out in her statement absolutely never happened. My take on it is that she saw a video on TikTok or YouTube about someone else's experience, saw all the attention and support they were getting, and decided to make up a story. Direct quote, "My friend and I saw how sympathetic people were being and said, hey, let's get in on this." Unfortunately, her father saw whatever it was she was doing and immediately cut contact with me and went to the police. My ex has hated my current partner since the beginning, but I'm at a complete loss for what to do now. I'm the one that is going to have to testify that there is no way that situation happened, while she is surrounded by people that believe her absolutely. Even though I know for a fact that it never happened how she said, the idea of having to get up there and call her a liar is heartbreaking. I feel like it is something that neither of us will recover from. I'm coming to the point where I am soon going to have to actually talk to my daughter about it, and have no idea how I'm going to address the fact that she blatantly lied, and that it has completely destroyed our lives. My partner lost access to his own daughter since his charges prevent him any contact with anyone under 16. I haven't been able to talk to my daughter in a year. We've lost friends and family and are going to be out tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees before it's over. I love my daughter, but I'm also intensely angry at her for the horror and trauma we have gone through. I recognize that she might not understand the consequences of her decision and that her father would have been inclined to pursue this even if she tried to tell him it wasn't true. But I just can't disregard all the damage she has caused. And for the record, no, I'm not trying to cover for my partner. If I had any doubt about it actually being true, I would be in a very different place. I wouldn't be willing to testify if I thought there was any possible way it could be true. Oh my god, it's making me mad.
So unfortunately, my next story time is in this hard drive. And I can't get it out of this hard drive because I don't have the adapter to connect this to the laptop. So story time right now. And yes, I have leftover eyeliner from this morning's makeup, but we're not going to talk about that. So back when I was with my toxic celeb ex, there were a lot of things that if I did, they would bother him. For example, if I stared at my phone for too long, I'm talking about like longer than 30 seconds, he would automatically assume that I was texting some guy. I know. Sometimes he would even get mad if I asked to spend time with him because that would mean that I was trying to make up for something bad I did. So one time I asked him if he wanted to have dinner. So I went to Trader Joe's, I picked up some really nice stuff. I went to his house and I made us some paninis. The whole time I was cooking, he was in his office watching stuff on his laptop. Moving on. Finally, I tell him to come have dinner and we sit down to eat. He was completely quiet. Then he asks me, "What did you do?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" That's when he told me that I must have done something really bad in order for me to want to make dinner for him. So obviously I said nothing. I just wanted to spend some time with you. We haven't seen each other in a while. You see, we would break up like every 2 weeks. And the whole time we were together, there was a handful of times where we actually went to dinner or even spent time together. The rest of the time, it was him in his office, me hanging around his house, and eventually just saying, "I'm gonna go home." So he says, "No, I don't believe you. Something's up with your face." And then I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "You look different." I was like, "I can't change my face, dude." Then he grabbed my phone, started looking through it, and when he didn't find anything, he got even more upset. That's when I had to make up a lie. Like, I literally had to come up with something bad I did because he was not letting it go. And in order for me to prevent him from getting even more upset and making it, turn into something else, I told him that I had an audition. He hated when I had auditions. To him, it was like the end of the world. It meant that I was gonna go see some guy. Even if I showed him the email for the audition, he still wouldn't believe me. He even suggested once that my agent was pimping me. There are so many more story times connected to all of this. So I told him I had an audition. Mind you, I didn't even have an audition. I was just making it up. So the next day, I literally pretend to go to an audition. I stayed there for like 5 minutes, and then I went back to my apartment. He calls me to check up on me, and I say I went to the audition. It was fine. That's when he tells me not to bother to go to his house ever again. He broke up with me. Moral of the story, if you are with someone toxic, who has to control, know everything about you, who doesn't even want you to continue your career, who doesn't want you to hang out with friends, drop them. Just drop them. Also, I do have so many more story times. Do you guys want to hear them? Story time about how my lying, cheating husband moved his mistress into our home. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. My husband is a classic narcissist. He's a total love bomber, lies, and gaslights. We met through some friends at a party, and the day that we met, he totally love bombed me. He told me I was the most beautiful girl he'd ever seen, that he wanted to marry me, and that we should have kids. Unfortunately, I believed everything he said. On our second day, he told me that he loved me. And when I didn't tell him that I loved him back, he got really upset and told me that we shouldn't see each other anymore. A few weeks passed, but I couldn't stop thinking about him, so I reached out. Worst mistake of my life. At the time, I didn't realize how wealthy he was. But boy, did he start letting me know. He would flaunt that he was super rich and even invited me on a trip, which he paid for. We ended up going to the Bahamas and it was magical. Of course, I started falling in love with him. The last day of the trip, he actually asked me to marry him and I said yes. My whole family thought it was absolutely crazy of me because I only knew him for about 2 weeks. When we got back home, I moved into his beautiful house. You see, I was in a really bad situation. I had a part-time job, no savings, and basically no future. At least that's what he said. So when I moved in, he insisted that I quit my job and basically tend to the house, which I did. So I had no money of my own. This was around the time that he would start gaslighting me. Whenever we got into fights, he would call me names and just threaten me. And when I would bring it up later on, he would totally deny that he ever said anything like that. When we started planning the wedding, things calmed down. He was always at work and I was always at home. We finally got married and went on our honeymoon to Italy. And that's when he started changing even more. He would shame me whenever I tried to post a cute picture of myself on Instagram. And he basically convinced me that I was trying to get attention from other guys, so I stopped posting. Our third night in Italy, he got drunk and we got into a really big fight. I decided to leave the hotel, but when I came back a few hours later, he had a random girl in his room and told me to leave. I couldn't believe his behavior. After about 20 minutes, he let me back into the room and told the girl to leave. That's when I told him I was going to go back home and that I made a huge mistake by marrying him. He apologized and started crying. He said nothing happened to her and part of me just wanted to believe him so desperately, so I did. When we got back home, he was on his best behavior. Until one day he told me he wanted to hire a live-in cleaning lady. Little did I know it was his mistress. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how my husband moved his mistress into our home. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. My narcissist of a husband told me he wanted to hire a cleaning lady. A live-in cleaning lady. A few days later, he shows up with this woman who clearly did not look like a cleaning lady. When I told him I did not want her living in our home, he told me that I had to do what he said because he was the breadwinner. Mind you, he told me to quit my job, so I did. That's when he told me that somebody needed to clean the house, cook for him, and basically take care of him. In other words, I wasn't doing that. Which isn't true because I made him dinners every single day and cleaned the entire house. I told him I knew she wasn't a cleaning lady and that he needed to kick her out. He got really angry and slammed the door. A few minutes later, I hear him coming up the stairs with her. He shows her to the guest room and tells her to settle in. Then he came back into the room, told me that I had to deal with it and that this is how things were going to be from now on. By the way, this girl is Russian, and my husband told me that she did not speak English. So basically, I had no way to communicate with her. But my husband did speak Russian, isn't that convenient? So, every single day, this girl would pretend to wash dishes, pretend to clean his clothes, pretend to make the bed. Oh yeah, and she would only wash his dishes, not mine. The situation was way too much for me, so I told my husband I was going to go stay with my sister. That's when he threatened me and told me that if I left, I might not be able to come back. So of course, I packed my things and went straight to my sister's house. The very next day, my husband shows up to my sister's house with divorce papers. He told me I needed to sign them because he fell in love with the cleaning lady. I told him I wouldn't sign them and he left. Then my sister called the police and told them that my husband had a woman captive in his house and that she was probably in the country illegally. And guess what, y'all? She was. The cops actually took her from the house and now he's asking me to move back in. He took the whole divorce back and wants to take me on a trip. My sister thinks I should get back with him just to make his life miserable. The problem is I have no money of my own. And to be honest, part of me still loves him. I really need some advice and perspective from someone who's not me. Story time about how I found my husband using Tinder and all the freaking dating apps. Claiming this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Once again, I'm at the airport, sorry. My husband and I were both total sluts when we met. He was seeing like 10 girls when I first met him, and I was dating 3 guys at the time. Well, let me tell you, neither of us trusted each other, like not one bit. Eventually, he asked me to be his girlfriend, and I really wasn't sure if I wanted to say yes, but I did. He is so good looking. Like everywhere we go, we get told we're such a good looking couple. So we know we're both pretty good looking. To be fair, we were both addicted to Instagram. I would get tons of DMs from guys, and sometimes I would answer. And I know that he was getting DMs from girls, although he never told me. We dated for a year and then he asked me to marry him. Of course I said yes. I thought this was his way of telling me that he was going to commit to me 100%. After 6 months of being married, I started getting really suspicious. He would never leave his phone unattended. And if we were having dinner, he would always put his phone face down. I know you all know that's a red flag. Basically, he was hiding his phone from me like all the time. One night, we got super drunk and I made sure to wait until he fell asleep. I got on his phone and found Tinder, Bumble, and Hinge. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how I found out my husband was using Tinder, Bumble, and Hinge all at the same time. But yeah, and cheating on me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So I got him drunk enough that he fell asleep. I got onto his phone and I found all the dating apps. I quickly screenshot every conversation he'd had on each of the apps. I was literally on his phone for 4 hours. Like, I didn't sleep at all that night. And the whole time I was reading his messages, I was crying. Like, I literally thought he was dedicated to me. I sent myself all of the screenshots and then deleted them from his phone. I also went through his Instagram and found a bunch of DMs from different girls. And a lot of them were big influencers. I can spill so much tea about that, by the way. I found a bunch of naked pictures from girls as well, and he even had a freaking Snapchat. At that point, I couldn't look anymore. So here's what I did. I invited both of our families to our house for dinner, ordered from a super fancy restaurant, and made sure everyone was coming. When we sat down to dinner, I told him I was going to go get my laptop. He asked me why, and I told him to give me a second. He literally thought I was going to give him a big surprise. That's when I exposed him in front of both of our families. Part 3 is up. Part 3 of how I found out my husband was using dating apps, cheating on me, and I exposed him in front of both of our families. So as everyone is sitting down and having dinner, I start a slideshow of all the DMs, pictures that had been sent between him and all these girls. Yes, I was petty enough to make a slideshow. My husband looks at me and tells me to take it down. Of course I didn't. That's when his mom got up from her chair and slapped him straight across the face. Of course my husband started crying instantly. His dad even grabbed him by the shoulders and shook him. My family was in shock. They were so disappointed in him. Mind you, him and my mom had a great relationship. He hung out with my family all the time. That's when I asked him for a divorce and I told him I wanted everything. By the way, my husband and I own a business and he's got his own money. So I ended up taking more than half of the business, 3 out of the 4 cars that he owns, and lots of money. But here's the thing, I still love him. Even though I have my own apartment and we live separately, he comes over all the time for, you know what? Like, we still love each other and still like each other, but I can't get past the fact that he actually cheated on me. He's asking for me to go back with him, but honestly, I don't know if I should. Once a cheater, always a cheater, right? But I'm gonna expose myself. I cheated on him too. What a
tender touch, drum glove, staying up, just talk to you. You stayed in touch, 2 continents, through all odds. Seems every night, yeah, all the time I'm calling out to you. Seems every time I take a drink, I'm reaching out.
Story time about how my crazy ex-girlfriend is trying to control my life, take over my Instagram, and keeps DMing girls on Instagram to block me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So most of you know that this girl DM'd me and asked me to block her boyfriend. Well, I contacted her boyfriend, told her about it, and he told me his story time about her. I met my crazy ex last year. We actually started talking at a party. We live in the same city and have the same friends, so I knew about her. After the night I met her at the party, I decided to ask her out. I mean, she looked like a normal, sweet girl, but little did I know that she was gonna make my life miserable. So we started following each other on Instagram and exchanged phone numbers. We went to the beach and had a really nice first date. Again, super sweet girl. We went out on 3 more dates before I asked her to be my girlfriend. On the 4th date, she came over to my family's house and we had lunch. Of course, she made the best impression on my entire family. I mean, she kind of seemed like too good to be true, you know? She was super cool, easy to talk to, and really funny. The only person out of my family that did not like her was my sister. My sister told me that she got the impression she was only acting the way she thought I wanted her to act. I told her she was being paranoid and to give her a chance. So about 2 weeks into us dating, she started staying over at my apartment. But here's the thing, she basically moved in. She brought over a bag of clothes, her toothbrush, moisturizer and shit, like girly stuff that I just had no idea about. I didn't say anything to her, but in my mind I was like, whoa, this is moving a little too fast. A few days later, one of my friends had his bachelor party. So of course I told her that I was gonna go, and she got really mad. She told me that if she couldn't go to the party, then I shouldn't go at all. I explained to her that this party had been planned for months now. She then grabbed my phone and called my friend whose bachelor party it was, and she basically asked him if she could come. My friend thought it was super weird, but eventually said yes. So my crazy girlfriend got herself invited to the bachelor party. And guess what? It was at a trip club. So she spent the entire time telling me that she was super uncomfortable and didn't let me have fun at all. I barely spent time with my friends and the bachelor because she wanted me to stay with her because she felt so uncomfortable. I asked her if she wanted to go home and she said yes. I told her I'd go get her a cab, but she started to cry and told me that I needed to leave with her too. That's when I put my foot down. I mean, for her to show up to the party was bad enough, but now she's asking me to leave. I told her I was not going to leave with her and that she needed to give me space. She started begging and crying. I couldn't believe my eyes. She had never behaved this way before. I put her into the cab and she went home. Then she ignored me for 4 days and I had to beg her to talk to me. I told my sister what was going on and my sister got really angry. She said it wasn't normal for her to be behaving that way so early into the relationship and that I shouldn't be begging her. So I stopped. A few days later, she shows up to my apartment angry because I stopped chasing her. She told me that clearly I didn't love her. Mind you, we hadn't told each other we loved each other. When I told her I didn't love her back, she started yelling and running up and down the hallway in my apartment building. I told her to calm down, and one of my neighbors came outside and asked if she was okay. She ran into my apartment and pretended like nothing had happened. This is where it gets crazy. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how my crazy ex is trying to take over my life, my Instagram, and keeps DMing girls to block me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So a few days after she ran up and down my hallway acting all crazy, I asked her if she wanted to take a break. Of course she said no. And she told me the best thing was for her to move in with me. Like, what? I mean, I had one foot out the door and this girl was trying to move in. Then I just had to be honest with her. I told her I didn't like how she invited herself to my friend's bachelor party, how she ruined the night for me, and then basically acted all crazy. I mean, we had only been dating for 2 weeks at that point. She started to apologize and told me if there was anything I could do to forgive her. I felt bad for her, so I told her I'd give her a second chance. Worst decision of my life. Then she was suddenly back on her best behavior. This is when she started asking me questions about Instagram. She wanted to know who were the girls that I followed on Instagram. So I told her they were just girls that I didn't even know. Then she pulls out her phone and shows me my Instagram and starts scrolling through the list of all the people I follow. One by one, she started pulling up profiles and asking me if I knew the girls. I told her that if it bothered her that much, then she should just stop looking at my Instagram. That's when she told me she wanted to check my DMs just for her peace of mind. Of course, I had been DMing with other girls, but that was before I even started dating her. So I basically told her that she would find conversations from before we started dating. I made her promise not to get mad, and she promised. I gave her my phone and she started checking my DMs. She saw there were no new conversations, but she asked me if she could read through the other messages with other girls. I mean, some of these girls were only friends. I put my foot down and I said no to give me my phone back. She refused and started trying to read those conversations. So I snatched my phone from her hand and told her that she was being crazy. Later that night when I went to sleep, she decided to go snooping on my Instagram again. Unfortunately for her, I caught her. And when she gave me my phone back, she had changed my password. So I couldn't even get into my Instagram anymore. So of course I broke up with her and told her to leave. A few days later, my sister heard that my ex was telling everyone she broke up with me because I hit her. Everyone was believing her. She even called my boss and told him that I had been abusing her for weeks. Thankfully, my boss didn't believe her. He knows me since I was a kid and knows that I would never touch a woman like that. That's when I heard from girls on Instagram telling me that my ex was telling them to block me. And that's when I heard from Esther Tanya. 4 days ago, my sister bumped into my ex and confronted her about everything. She told my sister I cheated on her, that I hit her, and my sister punched her. She even threatened to press charges against my sister. My mom had enough and reached out to my ex's mom. By the way, my ex's mom had no idea she was doing any of this. Her mom called me and told me that she had done things like this before, and that the best thing for me to do was just to ignore her and hope that she didn't do anything else crazy. What do I do? Story time about how my dad and I caught my boyfriend and his wife cheating on us in a tent. So luckily this is not my real mom. This is my stepmom. Her and my dad married a few years ago. So my family and my boyfriend's family are pretty close. My boyfriend's parents and my parents, aka my stepmom and my dad, get along with his parents. A little backstory on my stepmom. After my dad and my mom got divorced, he met her and they started dating pretty quickly. And they got married after only 5 months of having dated. So she becomes my stepmom, but she never really made any effort to get to know me. And I never really liked her. Like, she gave me a weird feeling. So my boyfriend and his family asked us to go on a camping trip one time. And my dad and I didn't really want to go because we never really go out. But my stepmom was super keen on going and she finally convinced us to go, so we ended up going. I mean, in the back of my mind, I was like, wait, why do you want to go to this camping trip so much? We finally get there and set up our camping tents. That's when my dear stepmom says that she doesn't want me and my boyfriend sleeping in the same tent just in case we try to do something. In other words, she didn't want him and I to do the dirty. Why? Because she was hoping that my boyfriend and her would do the dirty. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how my dad and I caught my boyfriend and his wife doing the dirty. Literally right next to us. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So like I said in part 1, my stepmom said that my boyfriend and I couldn't sleep in the same tent because she didn't want us doing anything. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that during this time, my stepmom and my dad were always fighting and they were totally ignoring each other, so they couldn't sleep in the same tent. So basically my dad and I were sleeping in the same tent. My stepmom was in another tent. We all go to bed and everyone's asleep. That's when I started hearing like the noise of plants ruffling. I ignored it and I went back to sleep. But then I heard some giggling coming from the tent. So I start walking over to my boyfriend's tent because that's where all the giggling is coming from. I was trying not to be heard, and as I started getting closer to the tent, I tripped over and fell into the tent. That's when both my stepmom and my boyfriend start screaming, and I see them sitting naked in the tent. That's when my boyfriend started lying, saying that she forgot something in his tent and that's why she was there. And it gets worse. My dad wakes up and hears all the commotion. He comes over to find his wife and my boyfriend naked. Part 3 of how my dad and I caught his wife and my boyfriend doing the dirty right next to us. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So like I said in part 2, I fall into the tent and catch my boyfriend naked with my stepmom in it. That's when my dad comes over and sees them both naked. And my dad just started going nuts. He started yelling at my stepmom. My dad was so hurt. And I was too, but I was also in shock from seeing my stepmom naked. I couldn't believe that my boyfriend had been hooking up with my stepmom all this time. And like right under my dad's and my nose. That's when my dad and I were just yelling at them. But then my dad called an Uber and we went home. He went straight to his lawyer and filed for divorce. But of course, my stepmom didn't want to sign the divorce papers, so it took really long for my dad to finally get divorced from that witch. Oh yeah, and I haven't spoken to my ex ever since the day I caught him naked with my stepmom. I never even got an apology, not one from him. Time for shoutouts. I will be choosing one person from my live to give a shout out to in my next story time. So today's shout out is for Cindy_the_tree. Another story time is coming the day after tomorrow. Bye. Story time about how my roommate tried to kill my dog and blame it on me. This is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. My roommate is literally the craziest person I've ever met. It's a freaking nightmare. Wait till you hear everything she's done. Her and I moved in together at the beginning of the year, so we haven't been living together for that long. But before that, I considered her one of my best friends. We would hang out all the time. Oh yeah, and she loved my dog. I had just gotten out of a relationship and I told her I wanted to find an apartment and she suggested we live together, so of course we went and found an apartment. Things were good for the first 2 months. We had movie nights, we would cook for each other, and we would just go about our business without any problems. Luckily, I work from home, so I'm always with my dog. Whenever I have an errand to run, I'll just leave her in my room and she usually sleeps. A month ago, I come home and I hear my roommate yelling at my dog. But my roommate didn't realize I was home. When she saw me, she picked up my dog and pretended that she was just joking. I did not like it at all, so I confronted her and I asked her why she was yelling at my dog. She said she wasn't and that I must have heard wrong. The following day, she went to work and left the door open. My dog was about to run out and we live on a busy street. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how my roommate tried to kill my dog and blame it on me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So my crazy roommate started leaving our front door open, knowing very well that my dog could escape at any moment, and we lived on a busy street, God forbid. So I would constantly tell my roommate to stop leaving the door open. That's when she told me that she doesn't know how that's happening and that somebody else must be doing it. This girl was literally trying to convince me that someone was opening our door on purpose. So I finally decided to confront my roommate. I asked her why she was leaving the door open and why she yelled at my dog. And then she confessed that she actually hates dogs. She thinks they're gross and they don't belong in a house. She also told me that she always pretended to like my dog so that I wouldn't get offended. I told her that I thought the best thing for us was for me to move out. She starts to cry and begs me not to leave. She told me that she'll try to tolerate my dog more. After that, she gave me a printed sheet of paper with rules on it. Basically all the things my dog can't do. For example, my dog can't hang out in the living room or even sit on the couch, which she always did. And the biggest rule of all, she did not want her in the bathroom or the kitchen. She wanted her to be in my room all day. This is where it gets scary. Part 3 of how my crazy roommate tried to kill my dog. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. When she gave me all the new rules of how my dog had to behave, I told her I was definitely moving out. That's when she told me that she wished my dog was dead. She told me that my dog was coming in between her and my relationship. Ew. I literally had to sit her down and explain to her that my dog is like my child. I love my dog so much. I would do anything for my dog. Then she asked me if I loved her. I was like, yes, of course I love you, but my dog is like my child. So if I need to move out, I will. Then she gave me the silent treatment. A few days later, I tell her I'm gonna go to my friend's house. I get in my car and drive away, but I realize I forgot something, so I drive back home. That's when I walk into the apartment and I see my roommate holding my dog over the balcony. She was literally about to drop her. I grabbed my dog and I ran away. I went straight to the police and I filed a restraining order. So the police went to talk to her and she told them that I was the one that tried to throw my dog over. Thankfully, the police don't believe her, but now I have to find a place to live. How am I gonna go to my apartment and get all my stuff? What should I do? Story time about how I found out my roommate put cameras all over our apartment and was spying on me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I've been living with my roommate for 2 months now. She says she's a model, but she does a lot of other stuff. But like, if you look at her Instagram, she's a straight up model. Oh yeah, she's also trying to be an actress. Needless to say, she struggles with paying the rent. Me, on the other hand, I work in finance and I have no problem paying rent. In fact, I helped her pay for our deposit. I help her with groceries every month, so basically I treat her really well. Her and I have been friends for about 4 years now, but we were never really best friends. And to be honest with you guys, I really didn't know her very well when we moved in together. Because of COVID, I've been working from home and it's been amazing. My roommate is never home. Also, she has a lot of friends, so she's always out. Last week, she came home and installed some speakers into our living room and our kitchen. I didn't think anything about it. I was just like, okay, cool. She asked me if I wanted one for my room and I told her I'd let her know. Later on that day, I see a freaking speaker in my room. 2 days ago, I had a boy over in my house. He asked me why I had cameras all over my place. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how I found out my roommate put cameras all over our apartment and was spying on me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Listen to me on Instagram. But one day I have a boy over and we're watching Netflix. That's when he starts looking around my apartment and asks me why I have cameras installed. I was like, what cameras? He's like, all those speaker things are cameras. Don't you know that? That's when I nearly had a panic attack. He grabbed them, opened them up, and showed me the camera that was inside. Like I said, my roommate told me they were speakers and she even offered to put one in my room, which she did. That's when he told me that my roommate has been spying on me and recording everything I've been doing while I've been home alone. He then suggested we go into her room and see if she had one in there. We walk into her room and start searching. That's when I get a message from my roommate. It's a picture of me and the guy in her bedroom. And she started saying that I was stealing from her room and that she was going to take legal action. Of course, being smarter than her, I know I'm not breaking any laws. When I told her that she had been recording me the whole time and that I was the one that was going to take legal action, she told me she was sending the cops over. That's when my friend opens her laptop and finds all the videos she had recorded of me. Guess what? She had been uploading them to a website where people were paying to watch me. Part 3 is up. Part 3 of how I found out my roommate put cameras in our apartment to record me and sell it on the internet. Disclaimers, is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. After I found all the footage on her laptop, I went straight to the cops. The cops came back with me to my apartment, and when she arrived, they arrested her. Then she started saying that she had no idea how any of that got there, and that the guy that sold the speakers, aka the cameras, to her was just some guy that she met on the street. That she thought she was getting a good deal. She says that he was probably the one that was spying on us. But obviously, all the proof is on her laptop. She was selling my videos on 4 websites. And guess what? She was making a lot of money. She only spent 2 nights in jail. Her dad is a pretty powerful guy, so we got her out of jail. Her parents want to give me money so that I won't talk about it again because they say that it's going to ruin her future acting career. I don't know what to do. Should I accept the money and never talk about it again? Or should I expose her? I mean, she's really not famous or anything. I could take the money and expose her later on if she does become famous. But I did reach out to all her old roommates and friends and told them what she did. One of her roommates even told me she did the same thing to her. I'm also considering getting a restraining order. What do you guys think I should do?